This is ContactTalkRadio.com, consciousness in action, and you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Couldn't have been more than 2 hours here. But hey, that's life in climate change, New Jersey. So, and I'm glad actually you said you can't talk, because that gives me the opportunity to go out and get some exercise and take a walk.
Yeah, I'm a little under the weather anyway today, but then I realized I have to send a bunch of cards and gifts, and I hadn't done that yet.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the book.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, Sherry Horn Hassan of Karmic Evolution Astrology, and I'm coming to you on March 4th from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. Today, my guest is professional astrologer Ronnie Gale Dryeer, and this segment of the show is a rerun from December 10th. But I will be introducing her properly in just a few minutes. But first, my usual housekeeping stuff. Please note that you can check out my posts on my Karmic Evolution Facebook page. It's Karmic Evolution for your soul, if you get confused. And you can see my latest post, which went up yesterday, about this week's energies. I also post the full and new moon reports there too. Or you can sign up for my weekly Conversations About Consciousness email newsletter. You can do that on Facebook. If you just go to the left-hand side, scroll down, hit join email list, fill that out, and that'll come back to me, and you will be added. And you can also listen to any shows that you might not catch live or you might want to re-listen to at karmicevolution.com by hitting radio show in the upper right-hand banner. Also, I do continue to offer my discounted $99 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading. This is for those who want to gain greater consciousness about their soul's true mission and purpose, for people who want to move from chaos to clarity in their relationships, their career, their finances, or in terms of their health, and for those who want to heal old karmic wounds and co-create your own future happiness and success. The reading encompasses a look at from where in past life karma you have entered into this incarnation, and what is your highest destiny should you choose to live towards achieving that. So when you take advantage of my special discounted offer for Karmic Evolution, Astrologically Speaking radio listeners, it's very simple. Just send me an email at Sherry, SHERI, at karmicevolution.com, and I'll get your reading booked today. At almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. So let's get on to this week's Astro news you can use. As per usual, I'm going to look back a little bit, then look forward. So the monthly lunar cycle still waning since we had last week's February 27th Virgo full moon, which asked us to release any attachment to illusory thinking in order to create space for factual, provable, detailed information. that will result in greater mental clarity. So again, it's a move from chaos to clarity kind of equation, because we want to ground our intuitive ideas, our dreams, our fantasies into tangible, practical reality by paying attention to the details. Was Virgo moon. Let's get the facts, just the facts, ma'am. Now, Venus, which entered Pisces on February 25th, it waxed yesterday into a sextile to Uranus and Taurus. And that gave us the opportunity, if anyone wants to look back, to better understand that our relationship, that jealousy and possessiveness in our relationships is really driven by our own sense of insecurity. So it was a good opportunity to realize, by entertaining new insights and new perspectives, that if we don't have shared values in a relationship, it might not be a relationship that's benefiting us. Or to understand that we do have shared values with another or others, and to recognize that that is a large part of why we relate to or with them. Now, the big news this week is that yesterday, too, on March 3rd, Mars entered Gemini. And he'll be in Gemini, the mutable sign, until April 23rd. And between now and then, it's likely, because we're already seeing the signs of this, that as the weather grows warmer in the northern hemisphere, we will have the urge to socialize. And by that, I mean in person. So we can already see this through the news in the collective, that several states, I believe it was Texas and Mississippi, I'm not sure about others, are lifting coronavirus restrictions, opening businesses, undoing mask wearing requirements and social distancing requirements and things of that nature. So what I want to say to you is that Mars in traditional astrology and modern astrology supports the sun. The sun is actually our ego persona. It's our personality. We don't want to lose the ego. We want to disabuse it of certain notions that it may have incarnated with, or that were formed early in this lifetime, in order to reach our highest potential, right? So Mars supports the sun, but Mars wants what it wants in an egoic kind of fashion. So it wants it now, it wants it quickly. So we're cautioned when Mars moves into Gemini, which again, as I said, is a mutable sign about both communication and also local transportation. Represents cars and buses and trains and trucks that move things locally, and local business as well. So, because most of those things are moving people and goods and services, a large portion of which are related to business, right? So we're cautioned not to move too impatiently or impulsively during this period, and to look before we leap, before trying to get up to full speed. Because while Venus is in Pisces until March 21st, we don't want to be led by wishful thinking. We don't want to be led by what we see when we look through rose-colored glasses. Rather, as the Virgo full moon pointed out to us, we want to let go of any fantasies and deal only with reality. Now, Mars equals action, Gemini, the lungs, because Gemini has to do with duality, things that come in pairs. And so we may see a greater propensity for accidents to happen now. Another reason for us to establish some caution in our activities, whether they're physical activities or such things as opening the door, which is physical, I guess, and letting people in without a mask, who we never, saw before in our lives. So it's more advisable to pause before acting too quickly now, rather than taking a risk. And it's a great time, though, because Gemini is communication, early learning, right, or elementary learning. It's a great time to enlist the support of others, to learn a new skill, and or to excel at business, whatever that quote-unquote business may be. I mean, anyone who's a stay-at-home mother, her business is raising her children. So I'm using the term expansively. But especially anything we do that concerns writing, marketing, or sales. But the caution here is that Mars, which again wants what it wants, and in Gemini, it wants to express verbally or through writing what it wants, can be very forceful. And that in turn can spark arguments or disagreements because Mars may not understand how forcefully he's making his point, and that others may disagree with him. So in short, our impatience to express our views can cause arguments during this period between now and April 23rd, and it pays to be mindful that words can provoke or antagonize. And if we're not exhibiting our personal will, our Mars energy, it's possible that others may push our buttons now and make us angry. Okay? So what I want to point out here, which I did in my blog, is that, Mercury rules Gemini. Mercury in Greek mythology is known as the trickster. He's, again, connected to duality and things that come in pairs. So twins and siblings, hands, lungs, things of that nature. And lungs, of course, have to do with communication because we need to breathe to be able to project our voice out to be able to be heard, or we need to write, well, okay, I just put the kibosh on that. But if you're going to speak, you need your lungs, right? You need other things too, but vocal cords, there's a pair of vocal cords as well, and a pair of lips. But okay, I digress. So what I'm trying to get across is that while Mars is in Mercury ruled Gemini, it gives us the possibility to allow this kind of trickster energy, which can be known as a kind of sleight of hand, right? Which is not quite the same as manipulation, but it's like a shell game where you put a stone under one of three cups and the guy who's, standing out on 42nd Street in Manhattan is moving the shells really quickly. You give him $1 so you can guess which cup the stone is under, and then he picks it up, and because he's been so good at the sleight of hand, he's moved so quickly that you pick the wrong one and you lose your money, right? So it's kind of like saying we can do this with our words. And my point in saying this is instead of saying, I think all fill in the blank should fill in the blank, and arousing adversity or an adverse reaction from people who believe the exact opposite, we can accomplish getting our ideas across in a more subtle way that allows us to be trickster with our words, right? So concentrating on that while we're thinking about our marketing or planning our business or planning our future, whatever that may entail, we want to keep that in mind. It's kind of a little bit like you get more flies with honey than with vinegar. Now, Mars in Gemini can also make us a little bit ADD, a little bit scattered. Gemini is a mutable sign. Mutable has to do with focus. So Mars doesn't have patience all the time to focus. So it's a little bit like, well, I heard Mary say that the sky is falling, and then Bill said the sky is falling, but I don't see the sky falling. Do you see the sky is falling? Oh, look, there's a squirrel, Or, oh, my kid's calling me. I can't pay attention to the sky falling anymore and figuring out whether it's true or not, but I might repeat it 2 hours later to someone else. Right? So we want to engage in the kinds of things that are possible with Mars and Gemini, which is multitasking, but we want to be organized in how we do it. Okay, so that's just a hint and a piece of advice. The other thing is that while Venus remains in Pisces until, as I said, March 21st, visualization is huge now. Pictures and videos speak 1,000 words. Again, if you're a marketer, a coach, or somebody, or an astrologer who wants to coach or market themselves, this is a good time to plan out the use of visuals. It's also a great time to utilize meditative techniques that include visualization, and to imagine it and then do the detailed work without skipping the details in how you're going to accomplish it. So Mars and Gemini can help us write these things down, and keep them so we go back and look at them. Now, today on March 4th, Mercury meets up with Jupiter in Aquarius for the third time since January 11th, and we begin to consciously grasp the larger, more panoramic view of our future long-term goals, both business and personal. And expansiveness of thought allows us to think big. Again, as long as we remember to mind the practical details along the way. We can't manifest something if we don't deal with the facts and deal with the reality. So, I put this in my blog and I don't want to belabor it, but what I want to say is that this conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter in Aquarius happened 3 times already. Once on January 11th, once on February 14th, and today again today. On a political level, as Jupiter is, the ninth house of higher law, Mercury is news and communication, and in Aquarius, it's the legislative body. So we found out on January 11th that the House of Representatives was planning to impeach Donald Trump for a second time on the following days. On February 14th, the Senate acquitted him in their actual impeachment trial, and this was a historic event because it's the second time the same president underwent an impeachment trial. And today, or leading up to today, what we had yesterday, I believe, is President Biden, who's the current Jupiter, right? Jupiter is also a person of importance, a head of state, a king, a president, that every American, so he made the announcement, Mercury, that every American, Jupiter equals expansion, should be able to receive a coronavirus vaccination. In Aquarius, it's a humanitarian bent by the end of May, which is far sooner than by the end of July, which was his original prediction a couple of weeks ago. So today also is a planned, the FBI has warned, and the U.S. House of Representatives has skipped meeting today because of the potential for violence at the Capitol again. I don't know if that's going to materialize or not. It's late in the day here, probably about 1 o'clock and 1 p.m. And, I haven't seen anything, but I haven't checked the news lately. So the only other thing I want to say that's going to happen between now and next Thursday when I meet with you again is that the Sun will conjoin with Neptune in Pisces on March 10th. Again, this is a calling for us to go deep, to use our meditation abilities, to chant, to dance, to create, to visualize, to dream, what we want to become manifest reality in the days moving forward or the months moving forward. However, we can do this by letting go of the notion that we're not connected to the divine realm and that we can't trust our instincts, our intuition, and our psychic capabilities. So that's a huge thing right now, and I want to leave you with that. This is a period between now and next week, and up into and through the March 13th Pisces new moon, which I'll be talking about next week at length, to allow yourself to intuit and then allow yourself to trust your intuitions. That's huge. Okay, so I'm going to sign off now, and you'll hear the introduction for Ronnie Dreyer, but I want to say that please join me next week on March 11th when I will welcome back to the show astrologer Alex Trenoweth, who specializes in children's charts and education. So till then, which I'll say again at the end, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste. So now I would like to introduce this week's guest, Ronnie Gale Dryeer, an internationally known astrological consultant, lecturer, teacher, and author, specializes in both Western and Indian astrology, and is based in New York City. She's lectured at national and international astrology groups and conferences, and her clients and students come from many different countries and all walks of life. The author of several books translated into multiple languages, Ronnie served as editor and or contributor to numerous anthologies and co-authored a chapter on Indian astrology in the anthology Religious Transformation in Modern Asia with Dr. Nicholas Campion. Most proud of her MA or Master's in South Asian Languages and Cultures from Columbia University, Ronnie's a guest lecturer on Indian cosmology for the MA Master's Distance Learning Program in Cultural Astronomy at the University of Wales. Currently, she's co-translating Indian astrological texts in Sanskrit. Ronnie conducts ongoing classes in Indian astrology and webinars on all subjects astrological, including an annual webinar on the year ahead, which notes eclipses, planetary stations, ingresses, and notable aspects. To find current information on all these and more, and or to sign up for her newsletter, go to ronniedreyer.com. That's RONNIEDREYER.com. Okay, so Ronnie, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm a little under the weather, so if my voice gives out, you'll excuse me for that. Otherwise,
if your voice gives out, I'll just talk over you. Okay. Until you get it back, and then you'll be back in the game. Mercury's in Sag. So listen, you're an expert as far as I consider you. First of all, I have to say this because I've said this to you personally, Ronnie, and I'm going to say this to you. This woman translates Indian astrological texts from the original Sanskrit, okay? Can't get more genius than that, all right? So enough said. Not going to take any protestations from Ronnie. She's just one of the best, all right? So we'll talk more at the end, too, when you give out more information about your upcoming webinar. But as far as I'm concerned, you're an expert on eclipses. So just to start, can you explain briefly to our listeners, just to refresh their memory, the difference between a lunar and a solar eclipse in terms of how often they happen and what are their potential effects on us humans?
Right. So if the best place to always look for information about eclipses and other, celestial phenomena, so to speak, is nasa.gov, nasa.gov. And I know that probably in other countries they have websites from their astronomical societies, but NASA is really great, and they also have listings of eclipses and information just about every single eclipse, how what the magnitude of each of these eclipses are, where they take place in the world, and all of that. And you can also then find out about all of the dates and all of the times that they occur, and that's really where in the past I've gotten most of my information. So there are always 2 eclipses each year. Sometimes you have 3 eclipses each year, just depending on the angle of the sun and the earth and the moon. And so we have them 6 months apart in pairs. So last summer we had, for instance, 3 eclipses. That's not as so unusual as people think. Every couple of years we will get a series of 3 eclipses. But we talked about those eclipses last summer. But right now we're in the midst of what I always call eclipse season. Different astrologers have different ideas about eclipse season. I usually take it from the time of the first eclipse to the time of the second one. But also I will, as we will talk about, extend it to when the nodes and other planets activate that eclipse degree. But the eclipse of a lunar eclipse sometimes happens first, depending on if it happens during a waning moon cycle, or the solar eclipse will happen first if it happens during a waxing cycle. So the lunar happens always at a full moon, which is the sun and the moon at opposite degrees. And it's when the earth comes in between the sun and the moon, blocking the sun's rays from reaching all or part of the moon, so that the moon is hidden from view. It depends whether it's total or it is, penumbral or a partial eclipse, depending, because the shadow, the earth passes through a portion of the shadow, and it blocks all of the rays from reaching the moon. Sometimes it'll hit it exactly, and it's a total eclipse, and sometimes partially. So the one that occurred in November 30th, a couple of weeks ago, that was more of a partial or penumbral eclipse. The one that is happening on the 14th, that's a solar eclipse, and that is going to occur, again, 2 weeks after the last one. And that one is total. And that is always on a new moon. And it's when then the moon comes between the sun and the earth. So it blocks the light of the sun. And when it is, when the moon shadow falls on the earth's surface, then part or all of the sun's disk is covered or eclipsed. So this is the one, when you have a total eclipse, that's always the one that sort of astrologically tends to influence things in a more intense way. The lunar eclipse, when it's total, does that as well, but the solar eclipse tends to be the one that a lot of us really kind of look at. And this year, just interestingly enough, happens to have been a year when we've had 3 eclipses the last three solar eclipses, I should say, have been what they call either total or annular. And the annular eclipse is always very, very, also very, very, very close. So in terms of how much the sun gets blocked. So the point is that we have had a year, we've had a crazy year for many reasons, and one can give, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, Pluto, Mars last year hitting the degree of the total eclipse of December 26, 2019, Mars retrograde, and the long Mars journey in tropical Aries, from the Indian point of view, sidereal Aries and Pisces, all hitting those, Mars kind of came to hit that large conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto. And then the nodes hit it, then Mars squared it. Mars is still squaring it. So my point is that, in the beginning of the year, everybody was talking about the pandemic and what we're going to do with Saturn, Pluto, but it was way more than Saturn, Pluto. And all of these, idea of these solar eclipses that actually began, if I'm looking at my computer, July 2nd, 2019 was a solar total. December 26th last year, a solar annular. June 21st on the solstice last summer, an annular. And this one is, again, a total. The one next June is annular. Again, the one next December 2021 is total. So it's kind of odd. They're not always like that, that you're getting totals, back to back. We had that moon a couple of years ago. We had those blood red, total lunars. Anyway, so that is kind of like how it works. You get this 2-week period, and then you get another 6 months later where you get the next set of eclipses, which will be May 26th and June 10th. So that's kind of how it works.
So
in a nutshell.
yeah. Well, I re-listened to your recent webinar, which you did with the NCGR New York City group, and you spoke a lot about the proximity, because the eclipse is defined by its proximity to the transiting nodal axis, right? Right. So how does the proximity define an eclipse? And you mentioned just now this sometimes an eclipse, I think you mentioned it, but occurs when the nodes have already hit the eclipse degree, and sometimes the nodes cross that degree later. Right. So what's the importance of all of that?
Well, I think, that when you're looking at a, if you look on your computer, for instance, and you're looking at these eclipses, in whatever program you look at, whether it's a, normal tropical program, or like I do Indian astrology as well, so you can look at it from either side. What you see is that the nodes of the moon are going to be very close to the sun and the moon. So when you have a lunar eclipse, you're going to have the nodes very close. You're going to have the north node close to the sun and south close to the moon, or the opposite, because the nodes are always opposite each other. And, the nodes kind of are tracking where the eclipses are in terms of signs. So, whereas the nodes go through a sign in a year and a half, the eclipses also go through a sign in about that time. So these eclipses that started November 30th are important because they're also entering new signs of the zodiac. So tropically, they're going to be in Gemini and Sagittarius. They're going to be there, these two, November 30th and December 14th. Then May 26th, June 10th, they're going to be also in Sagittarius and Gemini, as was the one on June 5th that kind of started it. If you look at the Indian chart, they're in Taurus and Scorpio because the signs go back. So the lunar nodes are kind of tracking in the same way. So it's kind of that 18.6 cycle, and then opposite that 9-degree cycle, 9-year cycle. Sorry, you get the opposite. So the lunar eclipse is going to be where the nodes are close to that, sun and moon. The closer they are, and if you look in your, at the chart in your ephemeris or in your program, you see that they're close, and the closer they are is when the eclipse is more total. So the more they're far apart, then you're getting that partial eclipse. And the solar eclipse may occur, for instance, I have it written down, within 18 degrees of a node, but it has to occur within 15. So it can be, far apart, but as it gets closer and closer, it's more intense. The lunar may occur 12 degrees, and it must occur, the full moon, within 9 degrees. So what it means is that when you have a new moon, for instance, like the one that's coming up on Monday, which is a solar eclipse, what happens is that you're going to get the sun and the moon both conjoining either the north node or the south node. When you have a lunar eclipse, each of them are going to hit a node. And that also defines, of course, what you can say, like if it's a north node eclipse or a south node eclipse. So the one on November 30th, for instance, the moon was at 8 degrees of Gemini. Of course, if you do, Vedic, it's 14 Taurus. But the north node, was 19-degree Gemini or 25 Taurus. So that means that they are about 11 degrees apart. That means because the node moves in a retrograde fashion, it is going to hit that degree. The north node will hit the degree of the moon, and the south node will hit the degree of the moon next August. So I always find, and I mean, you have to take a 1 degree orb. So I always look at that as like the span of an eclipse. So it means like what you're starting to do now in November 30th, or especially if it hits a planet in your chart, it's always going to be in a house in your chart, wherever that eclipse is located. It's starting a process. Things get revealed during eclipses. They get awakened, and the partial ones take a long time. It's like a slow burn. And then next summer, you might find the result of something that you actually started in November. Now, the one on Monday, which is December 14th, and that is a very close eclipse because it is a total eclipse, but the nodes are quite close to that sun and moon. The sun and moon are 23 Sag. The south node is going to be at 19 Sag, 1956. So it's like almost 3 degrees apart. And then of course in the Vedic chart, they're 29 Scorpio and the south node is 25 Scorpio. Now that node hit the degree of the eclipse back in September. So if you go back to September, especially, it depends again if you're using true or mean. Now I use true. When you use a true node, it's kind of going to be hovering around that degree for the entire time that it first kind of comes to that eclipse degree.
Ronnie, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to know if you could give a brief 1 or 2 sentences to our listeners who may not understand the difference between a true and a mean node.
Well, the true node, the whole idea of the nodes, have a lot to do with the crossing points between the orbit of the moon and the sun. Of course, we don't have an orbit of the sun, so we're projecting it outwards. The mean node is always moving retrograde. The true node is kind of like it's not an approximated degree. It's an exact degree that you can actually calculate, and sometimes it retrogrades and sometimes it goes direct. So that's why when you have a true node and you look in the ephemeris, you will see that between the time that true node came to tropical 23 Sagittarius and when it's going now, you will see that it is really hovering around 23, 22, 21. It moves very, very, very slowly. So it means that the eclipse that we're having now was activated in September. So sometimes the node hits it first, sometimes the node hits it after. And when you have a total eclipse, it's a very, very tight eclipse. So everything is very intense, which it has been the last 3 months. And of course, that also has to do with Mars. I mean, you have to look at always what's going on during these eclipse seasons. And because Mars was retrograde, we've had so much craziness and, animosity and anger. And it's a worldly thing, it's not something that just happens in America. it's all over the place.
Right. I just want to clarify too. So what you're saying about the solar eclipse that's coming up is that the effects of the solar eclipse started back in September when the node hit the solar eclipse degree.
Yeah.
And it will culminate with the December 14th solar eclipse?
It does. It culminates, but I'm not going to say that it culminates exactly on, that day. And that's really also because the node, the true node anyway, is sort of like, again, hovering around that 19-degree mark. And it's hovering around, around that degree for quite a long time. And it really doesn't separate totally until February, and end of January, February. If you look in that ephemeris, that node is sitting at 19 degrees of Gemini for these next 2 months, really. So that's kind of why the period gets very, very intensified, at this particular moment. And this, eclipse is like, if you go back to September, and think about all the things that, might have been going on in September, you have to look at your own chart. You'd have to look also back to, because we have like what's called a Metonic Cycle. Eclipses repeat every 19 years. The last time this eclipse occurred at the same degree on this particular day was in 2001, for instance. And you can go back to, that time. You can then go to 2011, where we had a lunar eclipse on that same degree. So all these things are really going on. And I went back, and it's funny, in 2011 was the time they had the terrorist on the plane with the shoe.
Right.
It's quite fascinating. But I think that what was happening also in September, if you look at the country, what you find, what's very interesting, and again, I'm not going to really heavily get into politics because we're talking about the world. But, if you look at President Trump's chart, he represents the country. So when things affect his chart, it's not simply that it's affecting his chart, but it's affecting the world. And if you go back to September, what you see and what you're seeing now, of course, is that the solar eclipse, which is, South Node eclipse, because the South Node is conjunct, is activating his eclipse, his natal eclipse, because he was born with on a lunar eclipse, a very tight lunar eclipse. So the moon, in his chart, the moon is 21 degrees Sagittarius, South Node is 20 degrees of Sagittarius. So that node kind of hit that particular placement in his chart. So it activated the eclipse. What happened in September, which was very interesting, of course, on the one hand, he got ill. He had COVID, which was something I was concerned about. I thought, I wonder if something is going to happen to him personally. And I wonder if something is also going to happen to the country. And indeed, what happened was the South Node came to his moon. It affected his health. The North Node came to his sun in the 10th. So it was also a victory for him. I mean, it was sad, of course. Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, but he was able to appoint a justice, and that was a victory for him. So you got that, those nodes activating his eclipse. In his natal chart, it activated his sun in the 10th and his moon in the 4th. So at the same time, and that's what's happening again now. This eclipse is activating his eclipse. So it's activating him personally, and it's activating the country. Now, the difference is that in addition to the nodes, which are still conjunct and around his sun and moon, is that solar eclipse that's on his moon. And the moon's in his 4th house, so I always thought, well, it has to do with, possibly a move, because the moon is his 4th. It has to do with the White House. It does have to do with women. Moon is women.
Right.
Maybe he has older siblings. He has a mother-in-law. It's a very interesting thing to kind of ponder. But the other thing is that it's activating, this instability, the moon, which is going to kind of take you in many different places. And again, I'm not making any predictions because eclipses bring surprises and bring things out in the open. And that's why every day we have a new story in the news. It's crazy. This one's going to court.
In addition to what I mentioned, right?
Hunter Biden is being investigated. I mean, things like that. Everything is coming to the forefront. And I think that it's quite interesting, of course, that the electors in our country are meeting on the day of the eclipse. I don't put anything past anybody. I mean, it's just everything is so very intense, and it's because Mars is also sort of tied in.
I was just going to ask you because you started to go down that road, and I think I interrupted you. So I really want to hear what you have to say about Mars is coming up for the final square to Pluto, right?
It's coming up to all those squares, and that's what really has, I mean, more than even this eclipse, which, the one thing I will say about this eclipse, and this is what's concerning to me about this solar eclipse. Now, number one, when you go to these eclipses, you have to see, of course, in your chart what it's doing. If it doesn't hit anything in your chart, it's still in a house in the chart. So it's always somewhere in your chart. And that's going to kind of wake up things that you have to deal with, maybe that you started in September, but that lunar eclipse, remember, was in Gemini, sidereal Taurus, and that's going to be something that's going to go on through next August. So the areas of life that are concerning you, those are the things you have to deal with. It's not necessarily bad. It could be wonderful things that you wanted to do for so long, and now it's like, wow, I'm going to finally do it. Or, things are revealed to me. I really have to go to the doctor. This thing's bothering me, and I really should get it checked out. Anything, that's been going on, you kind of have to pay attention to. But that lunar eclipse, happened the day after Neptune stationed, and it also had Neptune in an exact square, in a square to the nodes. So it already started things that were not clear. So, there's this kind of lack of clarity. But what's happening now with this eclipse on Monday, and this is the concerning thing to me, is that the Iran scientist who, was murdered on November 27th. So it was right before the eclipse. And again, there's this mystery surrounding it. However, if you relocate this eclipse, meaning you can do an eclipse for any country in the world, but I will tell your listeners that if you go to your program and you draw this solar eclipse for Iran, for Tehran, what you're going to get is Mars at the exact degree of the midheaven on this eclipse on December 14th. So I do know that everybody in America is, their eyes are on the election, but my eyes are a little bit on Iran. So I'm a little concerned, and I'm concerned about that because of this, Mars, because anytime you have something that happens during an eclipse, it's intensified. And Mars in the country, like I've been saying in my newsletters for months, I know that Saturn, Pluto, and all the Capricorn planets, and yes, I know the eclipses. I think this is the year of Mars. I think this has been the year of Mars. I think Mars, you know what I mean? It's like intensified.
Absolutely.
Everything.
Mars in Aries, especially with the retrograde, 7-month period. Yeah.
Right.
It's huge. It's interesting. I just want to mention, I think during that period, I know it was after the election, so I'm thinking it's around the end of November, beginning of December, reportedly President Trump was discussing attacking Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would make sense too, with Mars transiting, Iran's midheaven or Tehran's midheaven.
Well, the intensity of these 2 weeks, I mean, the reason I say this is because people do get fixated on our country because that's what concerns us. But, the whole world is under one sky. So, these are also things, Brexit is going to be, maybe finalized without an agreement, things like that,
Finalized without an agreement. Talk about Mercury square Neptune.
Exactly.
So we're finalizing this. Oh, wait,
Exactly.
It's not a plan. It's not an agreement. It's not a okay, never mind.
But, November, the third Jupiter-Pluto conjunction came to pass November 12th. November 14th, we had Mars going direct. The point is that November was such an intense month, kind of leading up to what's going to happen now with this eclipse. And yes, it is kind of a culmination of what's been going on the last few months. And I think Mars, the reason that Mars was so troubling to me was because of the fact that, that Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto clump that we had, that of course Barbeau predicted a pandemic years ago because of this, conjunction. But the Mars then crossed over it in March. So that kind of led to a lot of, craziness. I mean, Mars came over Jupiter on the 20th, Pluto on the 23rd, Saturn on the 31st, which was equivalent to the days of the pandemic lockdown. I mean, that's, when we started to go into lockdown. But Mars squares Jupiter 3 times because of the retrograde. Mars squares Pluto 3 times and squares Saturn 3 times. And that's what we're coming up to. The final square is yet to come. So we have the final square of Mars to Pluto, December 23rd.
Right.
The final square of Mars to Saturn, January 13th. And the final square of Mars to Jupiter, January 23rd. And that's why what does really get me a little bit uneasy is Mars is violence. Mars is anger. And this is just what's been going on, no matter who gets, no matter what happens with this election, no matter who stands there inauguration day. Right now it's, President-elect Biden. But the point is that it's anger. It's dividing. It's so divisive. And if you go back to some of these squares, it's kind of eerie how astrology works, because Mars squared Jupiter August 4th. I had been tracking it. August 4th, Beirut, Lebanon, had that huge explosion.
Right.
And in the East Coast, we had, from the hurricane, an electric outage in some areas for like up to 2 weeks.
Raising my hand. Yes.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And then we had Mars square Saturn on August 24th. Mars square Saturn is always an angry kind of aspect. It happened during Columbine, in fact. But Mars square Saturn occurred on the 24th, and on the 23rd, Jacob Blake was shot in Kenosha. So I don't mean to scare people. I'm just saying that, please, I would hope that maybe we don't act on our anger, and because it is going to be an angry time, not just here. Again, it's explosions, it's bombs. That's why Mars on the midheaven of the eclipse on December 14th in Tehran troubles me. But, I always tell people, like, please try to just, talk things out, debate things. I mean, there have been disagreements for thousands of years. No two people are going to think alike. So I guess my point is that the next 3 squares are finally going to finish off this period, and because, of course, we're still in what we call the Mars, retrograde shadow period. I kind of call it like a retrograde arc, but it's the shadow, and that is between the time that Mars enters the degree where it's eventually going to go direct. So July 25th, Mars entered 15 Aries, and then it stationed on that degree all of November. So it stationed retrograde though at like 28 of Aries on September 9th. And then you will get Mars going back to that degree of 28 Aries again in the beginning of January, first week. So that's going to kind of finish things, finich that whole Mars Mars shadow period.
Right. It's interesting because I heard a pundit say recently, one of the people who's interviewed on was, I think, MSNBC, who said, and it's interesting to think of what you've just said about Mars in relationship to the square of the nodes to Neptune, which is that when we get to the period around at least the inauguration on January 20th, and you mentioned, the last square is going to be the 23rd,
Right.
that those who are fervent believers in what many of us know to be, misinformation about the election having been rigged and fraud and stuff like that, when it becomes a reality that Joe Biden is inaugurated, assuming that does come to pass, they will be so angry that the anger will rise to the surface. And I have a feeling, I could be wrong, that certainly between now and then, or certainly between the end of December and January, that we're looking at a period where people are going to be so disillusioned by reality that they're just going to be thrown off, and not know what to do. And some of them will react violently.
But it's been coming, you know what I mean? It's been like a slow building.
Okay.
But,
Yep.
I do want to, because we have very little time left. I also want to say that the thing that's really very important in this time, when I say things get revealed during eclipses, right after the lunar eclipse, the vaccine was announced. So once this vaccine is part of the eclipse reveal, that suddenly we have something, that is going to, now, of course, not everybody's going to take it. It's again going to be vaxxers and anti-vaxxers. Okay. It's going to have some side effects, but that's another interesting reveal that happened during this eclipse season. The first major reveal really was the vaccine was, unraveled. And I do I try to end positively by saying we are going to have that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which is going to be on the winter solstice. So interesting. We had the eclipse, the solar eclipse last summer on the summer solstice. And now we have Jupiter-Saturn on the solstice, which is the same degree where Mars conjoined Saturn at the end of March.
Wow.
So it's kind of like hope, because the way I look at it in terms of when you're doing also, one of the things I always learned is like, especially the last period when Jupiter is behind Saturn, it's kind of like a balsamic moon phase. You know what I mean? Like Jupiter is behind Saturn. It's been creeping up. And suddenly now we're going to finally have this conjunction, and Jupiter is going to move ahead of Saturn. So instead of Jupiter being like 12th house from Saturn, Saturn's going to be 12th from Jupiter. So Jupiter is going to take the lead. You know what I mean? So that's how I look at that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, that, maybe through the vaccine and through other things that are going to be, unraveled, a lot of different, hope that we have through that, because it's on the same degree as that Mars-Saturn on the end of March. And I hope it means the economy will be okay or better, because that also in March was, like the demise of the stock of the market. I mean, everything.
Right. Which has been volatile ever since, although it's up now. Yeah.
Well,
really
so it's
interesting.
Crazy, right? Like
yeah. No, very, very interesting. And then, of course, next year we'll deal with the Saturn square to Uranus, and because I've had people like Mitchell Lewis on this show who are financial astrologers who predict, disruption in the markets at that point. Based on the historical trajectory of Saturn and Uranus years gone by.
Right, then we have that, right. But I think these couple months with Jupiter moving in, like right now, in fact, the vaccine was unraveled and the market went crazy sky high, because people are hoping it means transportation starts again and tourism starts, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like putting your hope into industries coming back.
Well, it feels also like an expansion of something beneficent or beneficial into groups. And given what you've said about the solar eclipse, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the lunar eclipse. So given what you said about the lunar eclipse in Gemini actually kind of culminating by next summer, sometime in August, that the distribution of the vaccine to the many different groups, right? Because we have all these different groups that are, some are prioritized and some are not. So getting that coordinated, it seems like it would bode well for that, right?
Well, I think I also said that in the New York lecture when I was talking about the eclipses of 2021. I said that I thought that maybe by the next two eclipses, which are May 26th and June 10th, that's when we'll really start to see the benefits of the vaccine. So I think that because this eclipse was this vaccine or these vaccines were unraveled right after the November 30th eclipse, I have a feeling that by, next eclipse season, which is between May 26th and June 10th, then maybe that will show that it's had an effect and it will be more available to people who, want to take it. Okay. What can I say? I mean, we can go on and on. I mean, you've had a lot of people on this show talking about the year ahead in December. And so there's so much, everybody has a different take. I mean, Elizabeth talked about the fixed stars, which I didn't even go near because she did a great job on that.
I'm pleased that you've been listening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I come out of the journalistic mold. I like to present different viewpoints and people who know their stuff, that it's like you just said before, it's about dialogue. It's not necessarily about conflict, But listen, we only have about 2-3 minutes left. So I wanted to make sure that you get an opportunity. I did give out your website earlier, but do have a significant degrees seminar, webinar coming up, right? So please give everyone information on that, how they can reach you, how they can sign up for your newsletters and book, a place at the seminar.
Right. So every year, I've been doing this, I think, for about 9 years. I mean, and every year it gets bigger and bigger. Last year was really big because there were so many things going on this year. But I label, it's called the Sensitive Degrees webinar. And basically I talk about the eclipses, the stations, the retrograde stations, different aspects that are important, like Saturn, Uranus this coming year, and also Jupiter and Saturn changing signs. And I do it from the ingresses. So I really give like a good overview, and I really try to focus a lot on these degrees because I find that that's such an important key, like this year with this Mars and these degrees that keep repeating in importance during the year. And that is showing always when things manifest, I think, in your chart and in the world. And so if you go to my website, you can sign up for it. And it's on the 20th of Sunday, the 20th. It'll be from 11 to 3. I realize that there's a lot of freebies out there and a lot of people are talking about the year ahead. I know that. I've been doing this for many years and I give more than 50 page handout with charts and tables. So I think it's, kind of like worth, that's why I charge.
I think anyone listening has gotten, if they haven't before, gotten a taste of your accuracy and, how detail oriented you are. So I'm going to tell everyone, this is a not miss, because what Ronnie's basically saying is, while we talk and I talk a lot about the energies and the impact of the astrological energies in the collective, and, it's no surprise here that politics is an interest of mine. But if you're looking for personal insight, it's just fascinating to track some of these eclipses in your own chart. So whether you have an astrology program or not, it's easy to get your chart and track these things, online for free. But my point is that the seminar that Ronnie's talking about is going to give you specific degrees that you might actually find out are really important or sensitive in your chart. And so I've been looking at that based actually on listening to Ronnie's most recent lecture, and I'm fascinated. I just took the lunar eclipse at 8 degrees 38 minutes to my 8-degree 37-minute midheaven. Now, I wouldn't have thought about that and I would have thought about it in general, but Ronnie's stuff really helped me hone down. Anyway, I highly recommend it. So RonnieDryer.com. I'm going to have to end, Ronnie. Is there anything else that you want, any other way that people can contact you?
No, they can contact, and if you can't come for the 20th, I always then send the recordings. It's audio, visual, audio, and the handouts. And listen, I know that I was focusing a lot on this Mars just because we're all a little rattled, I think, by the aggression and that's going on all over the place. But I really do hope this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is going to be our new cycle. And I really, really do believe that, that even with a lot of the anger, I do believe that at least the pandemic will start coming to an end. And I think that the pandemic has also caused a lot of the aggression and craziness because we're all, we're all locked up. Yeah.
Okay,
So
I've got to wrap up now, but Ronnie, thank you. Bless you for coming on the show again. I love your information, your insights. I do hope you'll come back and we'll talk about that. But meanwhile, thanks to everyone else also for joining us today. I hope you found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week on December 17th for another show when I'll be joined once again by professional astrologer Ann Ortley. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hold. Free to come and free to go. Free to come.